Hello everybody, welcome to Ruby Falcon, and this episode we are going to make a rack of lamb. Now this is a wonderfully rich and decadent piece of meat which a lot of people hold in very high esteem, but I promise you it's a lot easier than you may think to make. So let's get started, okay? So to make a rack of lamb you are going to need some ingredients. First of all, you're going to need a Frenched rack of lamb. Now, Frenched refers to the process of preparing the meat so that the way the bone is exposed at the bottom here, as you can see. It has nothing to do with the fact that we are going to use Dijon mustard. So you're going to need a rack of lamb, ideally Frenched, about 550 grams. We're going to need some olive oil. We're going to need some Dijon mustard, salt, pepper, garlic powder, rosemary, and mint leaves. So, rack of lamb is actually very flavorful by itself, but it is enhanced so much more by having a sauce to go on the outside of the meat, and that's what we have to make first of all. So to make the sauce, what we're going to do is we're going to start with the olive oil. We are going to use 1 tablespoon, that is 15 milliliters of olive oil. Then we are going to add 2 tablespoons, that is 30 milliliters of Dijon mustard. Do remember to shake your Dijon mustard as it has a tendency to separate while it is sitting. So now that we have the Dijon mustard and the olive oil in a bowl, we are going to use a spoon to mix it all together and get it to an even consistency. Now that we have the Dijon mustard and olive oil mixed together into an even consistency, we are going to add some salt, some pepper, some garlic powder, or pressed garlic cloves if you feel so inclined, some rosemary, and some mint leaves. I tend to like to emphasize the mint and garlic flavors myself, so I tend to put more of those two than the others. Now that we've got the herbs and spices in the bowl with the Dijon and olive oil, we are going to again mix so that way they are not just sitting on top but mixed into the sauce. And there you go, you have the sauce for the rack of lamb. So now that we have the sauce made, we need to apply it to the rack of lamb itself. So ideally, when you are cooking the rack of lamb, you're going to want to use a roasting tray with a rack. That will keep the lamb up off the surface and allow heat to get all around, fully cooking the meat inside. If you don't though, that's okay. A standard oven-safe dish will do. Just make sure that the bone side goes down because we're going to put the sauce everywhere else. So, next step is apply the sauce onto all exposed meat parts of the rack. You can put it on the bones if you want, but it's not going to do you any good because you don't eat the bones, and so the flavor will be wasted. While you're spreading the sauce over the rack of lamb, it's really important not to forget the ends or the top of the rack. So since I find as I'm spreading, sauce tends to build up on the spoon itself, I use the ends as a great way to get any sauce that's built up on the spoon onto the meat itself. Try and coat it as evenly as you can, but it's not a huge deal if there are minor imperfections in the evenness. So having made the sauce and coating the rack of lamb in the sauce, what we want to do is we want to preheat our oven to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. That's going to do the first part of the cooking. We're going to cook the rack at 450 degrees for 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, we're going to reduce the heat to 350 degrees Fahrenheit for an additional 20 minutes. So 450 for 10 minutes, 350 for 20 minutes. Let's throw the rack of lamb in the oven. I'll see you in 10 minutes. All right, it's been about 10 minutes, so what we're going to do is we're going to reduce the heat in the oven from 450 Fahrenheit down to 350 Fahrenheit, as discussed. Done. We leave it in there for another 20 minutes, and I'll see you then. All right, the rack of lamb is done. It has been about 20 minutes, so what we are going to do is take it out of the oven. That looks beautifully golden. So what we're going to do is we're going to carefully, because it will be very hot, remove it from the roasting tray and onto a cutting board. Ideally, you want to use a cutting board with a channel around the edges to catch any loose juices that are going to come from the trimming process. What we're going to do is I like to trim it with the bones facing away from me. And you just take a nice carving knife and cut between the bones. Do be mindful that sometimes there is cartilage or something like that right at the base of the bones here, opposite from where they have been Frenched, as you can see. So if you have a good knife, just cut right through it. Usually when you see a Frenched rack, one end, the bone is going to have a little bit of extra stuff past there. I usually cut there as well. Sometimes there is like a half bone in here, which you are then separating. Other times you're just making it a nice even cut. Look at the beautiful color of that lamb. Now that you've trimmed the lamb into individual pieces, you have a bit of a tricky choice to make. When you arrange it on the plate, it is easier to grab the lamb if you have the bones sticking out, but it looks better if the bones are sticking in. So depending on how into presentation you are, I'm going to have the bones sticking in for the sake of presentation. I like to have the mustard side facing up. Voila. And there you have it. It really is that straightforward to make a nice roasted rack of lamb. Very short prep time, about half an hour in the oven, and you're done. I am serving it with butter glazed sliced carrots and Mom's Dead Simple roasted potatoes. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope to see you next time. If you click over here, you'll find a video that the algorithmic overlords at YouTube think you will enjoy from this channel. And if you're really enjoying this, you can subscribe over here. See you then.